6 minutes is going to be tough. It normally takes me that long to say g'day, so I'll do my best. I feel somewhat underdone being here in this kind of this auditorium full of amazing creators and designers and what have you, because I'm not a designer, full disclosure. But I am, thanks largely to Judith's hard work on me over the years, a student of design thinking. And I seek to apply that on a daily basis to the most atomic parts of my life, to my family, my kids, to my role as I see it in helping to build a better New Zealand, and every day in the business, across every aspect of the business, from people to plant to process to product to promotion, etc. So I want to take 6 minutes to quickly traverse some thinking which sadly I think has already been somewhat traversed today, and lean less on, because I'm not a designer, the aesthetic elements, the visual elements, if you like, of our design DNA, and talk a little bit more about some of the cultural and behavioural elements that A, exist, and B, quite separately, should exist, and currently really possibly don't. Currently really possibly, that was a obfuscation, wasn't it? What if it goes right? This is just a piece of theming, if you like. It's a piece of theming that I use in the business constantly, because I think we are somewhat in New Zealand overburdened by the British element of our history, which teaches us to somewhat look at the downside and protect the downside. What if it goes wrong? Oh dear, what then, right? Whereas I think, in fact, because of where we are in the world and what we've achieved as a very, very small microcosm of the world, we can afford to be bolder and say, what if it goes right? Because what's the upside? Because the upside potential is enormous when things go well for us in New Zealand. So, yeah, as I said, briefly, New Zealand's DNA, what we know now, what we have but don't really use, and what I think we need to see more of. So here's New Zealand, the edge of the world. True photograph. Down here on the edge of the world, it's bred some thinking, and I think both Jude and Stacey sort of referenced a bit of this, that we're out here on the edge of the world, and it's our greatest benefits are also our greatest disbenefits. So our greatest benefit is our distance from the rest of the world's crap. Our greatest disbenefit is the cost and frustration and complexity of getting our stuff, our kit, our widgets, from here to the rest of the world. And sometimes that second category overwhelms the first. But here's the great thing. Who knew, right? Innovation occurs at the margins. Innovation does not occur when resources are abundant. Never has, never will. Innovation, true innovation, occurs where resources are constrained. Why else did Richard Pearce / the Wright brothers hammer the much better funded aviation campaign out of New York? Why else did Rutherford famously say, well, we had no money, so we had to think, right? The world's possibly been ruining that piece of innovation ever since, the splitting of the atom, but there you go. So, look, in general terms, if we can make a good story and we can tell a good story, the chances of us selling a good story offshore go up immensely. But that's what a lot of our markets offshore look like for us as New Zealand businesses. That's my market, for example, in the US. How the hell do I stand out in amongst all of that? How do I create a unique market space? Well, the obvious thing to do, of course, and we all do this to a degree, is to lean on brand New Zealand, the provenance. Why do we do that? Well, we do that because we have this innate sense, and I think it's right, that New Zealand can stand on its own in the world and has some uniqueness about it. And the great thing about brand New Zealand is those elements of building a great brand hold true, right? You want differentiation, but you've got to have relevant differentiation. Those are leading indicators in building a great brand. And they help to build knowledge and esteem, which are lagging indicators for a great brand. So brand New Zealand is a key component of what we do offshore. But here's the problem, right? And the previous panel, I just came in at the end of it, forgive me for coming late, but the previous panel was touching on this. These are the kinds of visual icons, if you like, that we use to reference brand New Zealand. Now, what's bad about that? Well, what's great about it is, of course, it looks beautiful, right? It's wonderful. Beautiful visual scape that is pretty unique in the world, unless you talk to the French and you say, why don't you guys tour New Zealand more? Because all the Germans come here, why don't you guys come here? And they say, well, what have you got? And we say, well, we've got beautiful mountains. And they say, we have them. We've got beautiful beaches. They say, we have them. We say, well, we've got wine. And they say, please. Right? So it's not that unique, in fact, it turns out. Right? Number 8 fencing wire. We go on and on about the fact there's number 8 fencing wire. We think outside the square. And here's the thing. There is some validity to this. I've been lucky enough to do business right around the world over many years, and I have discovered Kiwis think outside the square supremely well. We problem solve supremely well. Our big problem is we're shite at commercialising our great ideas offshore. Right? So we have the fortitude to design, but we don't necessarily have the confidence to take that design to the rest of the world. Why is that? Because we're great adventurers, and when we're offshore, and I think Jude mentioned that before, we're really good at saying, hey, it's okay, because if we screw up, we can always go home. So we're bold and fearless when we're offshore, but actually getting offshore, not so much. Right? So you see these kind of these aesthetics referenced again and again and again, and the kind of things, the projects that we hold dear, like this, beautiful archetypes that have been beautifully taken over by these businesses and used. 100% pure New Zealand, is that true? I don't know. But look at that, black and white. It's come from there, guys. We're still referencing the nature, the land of New Zealand. But what are we missing in all of that? What are the constraints on New Zealand as it stands right today? How can we apply design thinking to get us to the world in a better kind of a way? Well, no one said it better than Walt Disney. Sorry, Judith, I'm going a little bit over time. But he said, first think, second believe, third dream, and finally dare. Now, Stacey was just talking about this. We're great innovators, but we're not great iterators. We're not that great, actually, at executing in the world. A guy called Dev Patnaik wrote a great book called Wired to Care, and he talks about empathy, creativity, and execution, and all of those things. Execution is the most important. We've got to execute better, and we're not necessarily doing that. Why is that? When you look at that history, you can see how I'm not a designer. I nicked this from a New Zealand magazine. That's how good my photoshopping is. New Zealand was founded by people who look beyond the shores, beyond the realms of possibility, and far beyond what was expected of them. So that kind of thinking, transculturally, is embedded in us culturally in New Zealand, but we don't leverage it. Why do we not leverage it enough? Adapt or perish, guys. We do need to adapt to the modern world, and we need to use our core cultural, behavioural benefits to do that. And one of them is collaboration. Now, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to go on a trip with Judith to the Silicon Valley, and I was wowed by how collaborative those guys up there. Arch competitors having lunch once every 90 days, not to share secret sources, but to say, how can we build the overall sector? So that's the question we need to ask in New Zealand. How can we build New Zealand to the world? Because that's something we are not collaborating on right now. And I think it's a core component of our future design DNA. Collaborating for greater gain. Here's an example of something we've done over the last year. Put together a bunch of competing breweries. So 5 competitors from the New Zealand market saying, to hell with this, we can't be brand alone on the other side of the world, because when I walk into a Majestic's bottle store in London and say, hey, I've got this great beer, would you like it? They say, well, we've got quite a lot of that. But when I walk in as a portfolio of the New Zealand Craft Beer Collective and I say, this is a portfolio from New Zealand, we think it's the best and brightest, we think it's got great price elasticity, great portfolio elasticity, how about you take us all on? They say, I'll just clear a bit of shelf for you. And that's what they do, and that's what they've done. So collaboration actually works.
Is that a good point, Richard? Sorry.
I don't know.
Or you can...
Do you want me to stop? I've only got a couple more slides to go.
Go quick.
Oddly, this one. Velocity, we do need to move faster in this country. The Silicon Valley trip told me this. The guys said to us up there, we know about you guys down in New Zealand. We reckon we can commercialise your ideas before you're up for breakfast in the morning. We have great ideas. We're not moving fast enough on them. Here's an example of one we moved on really fast last year. Bumped into Taika at the airport. He was making this movie. It was hilarious. And I saw the trailer and I said, how do we get involved? And he said, well, the major problem we've got is we're self-distributing, because otherwise the distributors take all the money and you can't develop enough money to actually self-distribute. And I said, well, come and make a beer with us. That was a good start. We'll call it Delicious Net, because that's your social media hashtag. We'll build a great social media campaign around this, and we'll give you all the profits to help you self-distribute. So it was something we did really quickly in a 10-minute conversation over a few beers at Wellington Airport, and 2 weeks later we had this beer laid down. 4 weeks later it was out in the marketplace, generated about 100k for him in the marketplace, which we gave to him to self-distribute. We did it quickly, the packaging was awful. It didn't matter. It didn't matter because the impact was important. And the last thing I really want to talk about is embracing failure and moving fast. Fail fast. We have got to stop the rot in this culture, in this country, where we are starting to educate our youngsters that there is no such thing as failure. It's horseshit. Horseshit. Life is about meeting failure. Your success in life will not be defined by your successes and how you receive those successes. Success is easy to receive. It's how you deal with failure that will define your future in your life. And we've got to teach kids that NCEA, when it says you can't fail, is wrong. You've got to learn about failure and how to deal with it and be resilient about it. Because failure actually generates innovation. It generates things like opposite thinking. I won't go into this because Judith is looking at me. And the last thing I want to say is, this is just the strapline we have in our business, but we seek to use it inside the business as a modus operandi to say to guys in the business, hey look, it's not just about making joy water for the world, guys. Let's stretch our thinking and say, how can we use this thing which happens to be a business to do better in New Zealand? Maybe create an archetype for a business that's an amazing archetype, and we'll give the IP in that archetype to other businesses to create similar types of businesses. Construct the business differently without hierarchies. Construct the business around better thinking. Stretch our minds to how we can collaborate in the marketplace to grow the sector and to grow great business thinking in New Zealand. So don't just open a beer, people. Open your mind. Thank you.